Chapter 17 is all about different animal behaviors, and here for the chapter questions you need to do question 1 to 21, the review questions at the end of the chapter, and then I'm also expecting that you do your summary card. So there are two types of behavior that we're going to be talking about. We're going to be looking at individual behavior, so which is one animal by itself, and the example for that would be a dog panting. And then the other type of behavior that we're going to be looking at is social behavior. So the examples that you have here are things like courtship, for reproduction and parenting, so feeding and defense strategies of their offspring, communication within animals, and also between groups of animals. So you need to remember that behavior is, down the bottom here, the coordinated activities of an animal that are produced in response to an internal or external stimuli. So it is the actions of those animals. So the example that it gives you for social behavior is the activities of bees in a beehive. So those bees work together to build their colony. So the stimulus is what is external or internal to the animal. So it's what's going to trigger these behavior responses. So the behavior then depends on that internal or external stimulus, and it needs to be able to be detected by that organism. So it needs to be detected by sensory organs, and then you need to get that message transported by the nervous system. If it's an internal stimulus, we're looking for things like changes in hormone levels, and you need to remember that the hormone messages are a lot slower than the nervous system messages. So some female mammals signal that they're ready to mate with a reproductive posture based on their hormone levels. So when their hormone levels are at the correct level to signal that they're ready to reproduce, then their behavioral change is that they take a reproductive posture that is supportive of that. And then for external stimulus, we're looking at examples here such as like seeing a predator. So seeing something that is dangerous to that animal. We're looking at here the differences between something being an innate behavior or a learned behavior. Innate is a genetic behavior, so it's something that animal just does. It doesn't learn how to do it, it just automatically has that behavior built into it. So here, even the most rigid and automatic behaviors are affected to at least some degree by the environmental conditions, and the learning has a distinct genetic component as well. But those innate behaviors are really things that just happen automatically. Learned behaviors are things that really depend on their environment and their behaviors that the animal has discovered or been taught to do by either other animals of the same species or even animals of different species. So innate behavior is produced by that particular inherited pattern of those nervous cells within the nervous system, and this response occurs automatically in response to those particular stimulus. So that response is automatic, they have no control over it, and it is responding to a specific stimulus. So here, the baby picture on the right hand side, if you put your finger into the palm of a newborn infant child, it is automatically going to close its hand. That is an innate behavior, similar to how we talked about breastfeeding and then making the correct mouth shape to be able to feed. So these behaviors are ones that are innate, they're built in to the offspring so that they're able to best survive. So here we have instinct is the innate ability to complete a specific behavior pattern. No conscious intention is involved. So it's just instinct that these offspring know exactly what to do. These animals know exactly what to do with their innate behaviors. So releases are signs or stimuli that release a particular innate behavior. So visual, you might see silhouettes of predators and then the animal would know what to do. Audible, you can hear lambs responding to each other. And then chemical, you're looking at detecting pheromones. These are things that are innate behavior. They automatically happen. They're not taught how to do it, but they automatically know how to do it. Learning, on the other hand, is the modification of a behavior in response to a stimulus, but you need that previous experience to be able to do it. So the more that you experience something, the more modification you're able to make to your behavior. And it really relies on memory, as you can see down here. So learning is the modification of behavior in response to a particular stimulus based on previous experience of that stimulus. So memory is the ability to store and retrieve information about past events. This should be really simple for you to know this, but it's about remembering those previous stimuli and how you should respond to them. So listening to music while you're studying. So multitasking adversely affects how you learn. And this was said by Russell Poldrack. So what he said is, even if you learn while multitasking, that learning is less flexible and more specialized, so you cannot retrieve the information as easily. What he's saying by being less flexible is that your memory of those particular things is stuck to those songs. So if you don't have that stimulus behind you to help you remember those things, it's less advantageous for you. So some people might find that listening to music can help them learn, but in some cases it can really be a detriment to them. So they noted that they're not telling you to never do it, just not to do it when you're trying to learn something important. So for example, don't do it to study things for your biology exam, but you need to do it when you're looking to increase your alertness. So when you're cleaning or exercising, then listening to music can be a benefit, but it doesn't help you remember things for your exam. So you need to try and isolate yourself away from those distractions when you're trying to remember things. Imprinting, this is the tendency for an animal to follow or associate with a moving object that it sees during a sensitive period early in life. So here it has the picture of the ducks, and this is really important because you may or may not have seen that little ducklings will follow in a straight line behind the mother duck, and that is imprinting. Those ducks will follow whoever was walking in front of them when they were quite young. So ducklings can imprint on humans, they can imprint on other animals, but it is designed to keep them as close as possible to their parent so that the parent is able to look after them and teach them the other things they need to learn. Habituation is the gradual fading of a response. So this is a reduction of an innate response to a stimulus that through experiencing it, you know is going to be safe or irrelevant. So crows to scarecrows, for example, they know the scarecrows aren't going to do anything. So over time, they're going to become habituated to it, and they're going to know it's not going to do anything, so they're going to be fine to go near it. Similar to if you lived near a train line or a busy road, for example, when you're young, you'll hear the trains or that busy road quite often, and then the longer that you live near that stimulus, the lesser and lesser your response to that becomes. So you eventually don't even notice that that noise is going on because it's of no danger to you. So your response to that stimuli becomes quite reduced. Associative learning is when you're learning a bell. So if you're associating some kind of a signal or a symbol with the innate signal for something that triggers a particular response, you're looking at creating a different response. So hearing a bell and knowing that you're going to be getting food, for example. So this is known as conditioning behavior. So for example, you hear the bell at school, you know that class has ended and you automatically pack up and leave. There is the example of Pavlov and his dog. So here what Pavlov did with his dogs was he would ring the bell, feed them some food, and they would automatically start salivating. So he would continue this pattern of behavior, and then he could ring the bell and not provide them with the food, but they would then automatically start salivating. So you can find out some more information about Pavlov and his dogs from these links at the bottom of this page here. Another type of learning that we have is trial and error, and this is the refining of a behavior to suit the environmental conditions. So trying something, seeing if it works, and learning from your mistakes. So that's how you would have learned to ride a bike, how you solve mazes, how you put together puzzles. All of that kind of stuff is trial and error learning. You have to experience something to know what's going to happen, what the outcome will be, so that you can improve on your ability to do that. Observational learning, this is when you learn things by watching other people's behavior, so the viewing behavior of any other organism. So this is observational learning. Insight learning, this is where it's really for problem solving, and you're thinking about the problem rather than doing trial and error. So instead of trying multiple things, seeing what happens, learning from your mistakes, in this case you sit down, you really think about the issue, and then you take your strategic approach to solve the problem. So this is insight learning. You wouldn't have been presented with this issue before, but your previous experiences in other things and your knowledge in other areas is going to help you be able to solve the problem. So let's have a look at some types of behavior. So behavior for maintenance, so here we're looking at periods of activity. They can be daily cycles, so here we're looking at circadian rhythms or biological clocks. So this is, for example, you start to get tired at a certain time and you wake up at a certain time. So they're our daily cycles. You've got lunar cycles, which is to do with the moon, tidal rhythms, which is to do with water levels, and then the circannular rhythms, which is to do with seasonal changes for things like birds knowing when to migrate. So for movement, we need to be able to move as a behavior because we need to be able to obtain food, seek shelter, interact with other animals, and find mates. So to be able to move, we're relying on things like cilia, flagella, tentacles, fins or flippers, jet propulsion, legs or wings. Movement is really, really important to all animals. Feeding behavior. So here we can see some of those physical adaptations that we talked about at the start of this unit. So we could be looking at the structure of their teeth. And then we've also got behavioral adaptations. So crows, for example, picking up shellfish and then flying to a certain height and then dropping the shellfish to crack open those shells to be able to get the food out. That is a feeding behavior that this animal has. They can also have particular behaviors to avoid being caught, so they're survival behaviors. So here we've got things like releasing venom, camouflage, tasting foul or having spines, being nocturnal, sheltering, so finding somewhere to hide, escape responses, so swimming away. So you can see here this picture at the bottom right, this one's showing the yabbies. So what they do is they curl themselves up and push themselves away quite quickly, or their level of alertness and ability to respond to what is going on around them. And there's a video here that you can watch if you want to as well. But really, animals have a lot of different strategies that they can use to get away from prey. So they don't want to be caught, so they could release their venom to stop that predator. They could taste foul, so if the animal eats other versions of, say, these caterpillars that we've got, then they're not going to want to eat the other caterpillars because they know how bad they taste. So nocturnal, if their main predator is awake during the day, then they'll become nocturnal, so they'll be awake during the night when their predator isn't necessarily there. Grooming and preening. So grooming is cleaning hair with a rough tongue, so this is something that cats do, and preening is spreading oil over feathers in birds. So birds preen while other animals tend to groom, and this is a behavior about looking after themselves, finding wounds, making sure they're still able to perform their functions, and really just taking care of themselves. Home building, this is another behavior. So birds build nests, bees build hives, spiders build webs. You've got animals that dig underground to make burrows. You've got hollows in trees, and you've got termites, and they build nests. So home building is really important because they need somewhere to be able to go back to. So somewhere to leave their offspring, somewhere to escape their predators. So home building is quite important to animals. Territorial behavior, this is defending that area that they consider to be theirs. It contains limited resources against the occupation by other animals. So what these animals will tend to do is they defend their area quite aggressively. So they can become quite aggressive towards other animals that come into their area, their territory. And then here we're looking for things like, for wolves, they send some of them to walk around their boundary. Dogs mark theirs with a scent, and birds sing songs to say, this is my area, stay out of my area. So this territorial behavior is really these animals marking their zone and keeping other animals out of their area, because if they come in, then they need to share their resources. They need to be sharing their food sources and their shelter. They might need to be sharing their partner and all those kinds of things. And these animals don't want to be doing that. So they're going to mark their territory, and they're going to do what they can by becoming aggressive to defend that area. Home range, this is that area that the animal will go into to be able to forage, which means collect their food. So sometimes this area can be quite big, and then sometimes it's not quite as large. So the animal's territory and home range are the same on some occasions, and sometimes it will go outside of its territory, but still within its home range to be able to get some of these foods that it needs. But it's only going to defend part of its home range. Some animals will defend all of it, some of them defend part of it, but really this home range is anywhere that these animals are going to go to be able to collect their food. Communication is another form of behavior, and here it's information from one animal to another animal, and these messages or signals can be chemical, auditory, tactile, which means touching, or visual, and it can be either aggressive, cooperative, or defensive. So aggressive meaning angry, trying to keep something away. It can be cooperative, let's work together to build this nest, for example, or defensive, I'm going to hide away from you. So here, the example that it gives you is the saber-toothed blimey, which mimics cleaner fish, which is a different type of fish. And then by mimicking it, it then attacks these fish. So it fakes a communication signal of, oh, I'm going to look after you, and then it attacks them. So this communication is really quite important between animals within groups of themselves, or even between different species of animals as well. So we've got chemical communication, and here we're looking at pheromones, and these are released within a species, generally to attract, their mates of the same species. And these chemicals are released into the environment, and they transmit information to these other animals that have the receptors for receiving that chemical signal. If they don't have the receptor, they're not going to be able to detect that pheromone. So it is important that it is the same species, because they are able to detect that species' pheromone. Visual signals, these are animals looking at things around them that tell them when to do certain things. So birds, for example, will know when to fly down to get their prey because they've seen a visual signal of something on the ground, so that they know to go and get it, for example. But these are just visual signs, something that the animal sees that it then responds to with its behavior. Sounds, so here we're looking at barking, singing, talking, meowing, clicking, and croaking. And these are quite effective signals. They're a lot faster than chemicals. You can still use them when it's night because you're not relying on vision. And these animals might use it to be able to talk to each other, or they may use it to check where their space is, so how far away they are from something else. And they can also use it to say, well, I'm here, you need to come and find me. So they might use it for reproductive purposes. There's lots of different reasons why they would use sounds, but really they're using it to notify people where they are. Communication by touch, this is tactile communication, and it's mostly common in social groups of animals. So you've got grooming in primates, or feeding young by things like gull chicks, for example. This type of behavior really is amongst those social groups to bring them together. So it's a behavior that they do to show that they care for one another. So social behavior involves interactions between members of a group, and this communication is very important. So animals might aggressively signal their strength to other members of their group, and they could do this by yelling or roaring or strutting, so a particular type of walk. And then their hope is here that other animals will submit so that they don't need to have a battle that they're going to then lose. So if they're able to front really aggressively by yelling and those kinds of things, then their hope is that the other animal goes, oh, you're clearly going to be stronger than me, and submits without needing to fight the other animal. So we're also looking here at dominance, which is one individual has a greater access to resources. So here we're looking at foods or mates than other individuals in the group. So here it's a hierarchy of dominance, a pecking order within that group of animals, and you've got dominant males and dominant females. So there you're looking at things like wolf packs, lion packs, those kinds of things. There is a hierarchy of dominance. There is a dominant male, and that male has its rights over all the females generally, for example, and so they've got the right to the food. They've got the right to their choice of reproductive mates. So it's their DNA that is getting passed on. And this is the dominance that I'm talking about here. So that one particular animal is dominant over every single other animal in that pack. And the last one that we're going to look at is cultural exchange. This is the passage of information from one generation to the next by non-genetic means. So it's passing on this information by teaching it to the offspring, for example. So it's transmitted by observation and also by language. So by telling them something or by watching other people do it. So here you're looking at selecting and preparing food, catching prey, how to recognize enemies, how to defend themselves, learning particular songs and migration routes, bonding behavior in groups, courtship of mates, and that reproductive behavior. So this chapter has really looked at those behaviors of individual animals as well as animals within a group.